The courtroom fell silent, tension hanging thick in the air. Papers rustled nervously, chairs creaked under shifting weight, but one sound dominated the space: the pounding heartbeat of a woman betrayed. She was a billionaire, draped in silk and power, yet her strength seemed to vanish as she realized her lawyer had abandoned her, leaving her alone, vulnerable, and facing a ruthless opponent who would stop at nothing. The walls of the grand courtroom felt colder than steel, and in that moment of utter despair, no one looked her way. No one except for a man in a faded janitor uniform, mop in hand, who had been cleaning the floors at the courthouse. He saw her fear, her panic, her silent plea for protection. He didn't see her money, her status, or her titles. He only saw a human in need. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel's Soul Tale. The janitor's name was Thomas, a man who had spent decades sweeping the halls of power, watching wealthy figures pass him by, their lives polished and untouchable, while his own remained quiet and unnoticed. He was 52, weathered but strong, with hands hardened by years of labor and eyes that had learned to read people better than any lawyer ever could. That day, something inside him ignited. He couldn't explain why, but the sight of her, helpless, abandoned, and fighting against the impossible, stirred a courage that had lain dormant for years. As the opposing counsel began to speak, weaving lies with practiced ease, Thomas stepped closer. No one had expected him to act. After all, he was just the janitor, but he felt a surge of purpose. He stood silently beside her, his presence alone giving her a fraction of hope. When the judge's gavel hit, signaling the beginning of the cross-examination, he whispered words of encouragement she could barely hear. "I will defend you." It was not a boast, it was a promise. The billionaire, whose name was Evelyn Harper, had spent her life building empires, negotiating billion-dollar deals, and commanding rooms full of powerful men. Yet here, stripped of her legal armor, she felt powerless. Her eyes met Thomas's, and in that gaze a flicker of trust sparked. She didn't know why this man, who had spent his life in the shadows of her world, had chosen to stand with her. But for the first time, she believed she was not alone. Thomas had no legal training, no courtroom experience, but he had something far more essential: empathy, observation, and an unshakable moral compass. He recalled details of the case he had overheard while cleaning offices and listening from the hallways, conversations, phone calls, even fragments of strategy. Piece by piece, he started helping her counter the false narratives, whispering facts she had overlooked, prompting her to speak with clarity and confidence. The courtroom, once suffocating with hostility, began to shift. The air seemed to bend around their determination, bending in favor of truth and courage. As hours passed, Evelyn drew strength not just from Thomas's guidance but from his unwavering faith in her. People in the gallery began to notice: a janitor standing beside a billionaire, facing off against legal titans, refusing to yield. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered about the unlikely heroism unfolding before them. Thomas didn't care about the stares or the gossip. He only cared that she could survive this trial with her dignity intact, that she could see that people mattered more than status, that courage could come from the most unexpected places. Memories of his own struggles surfaced: lost jobs, failed opportunities, people who had written him off as insignificant. But all that pain transformed into quiet strength as he guided her through the courtroom storm. When the opposing counsel tried to intimidate, Thomas's steady gaze and calm presence reminded Evelyn that fear could be met with resolve. When the judge questioned her credibility, he subtly provided overlooked evidence she could reference, turning doubt into proof. Slowly, the tide began to turn. By the end of the day, the courtroom that had seemed impenetrable with hostility now resonated with a quiet reverence. Evelyn Harper, once abandoned, stood tall. She looked at Thomas, gratitude and astonishment warring in her eyes. No words could fully express what she felt, but the bond formed in those hours, between a billionaire and a janitor, spoke louder than any contract, any fortune, any legal victory ever could. She realized something profound. The world may reward wealth, but true loyalty and courage often come from those who are overlooked, underestimated, and unseen. The story of that day spread quickly. Headlines proclaimed that a janitor had saved a billionaire's life in court, but Thomas brushed off the fame. For him, the victory was personal and quiet. He had made a choice to defend a stranger, and in doing so, he discovered a strength he never knew he had. Evelyn, forever changed, made it her mission to recognize the invisible heroes around her, the people who quietly keep the world turning, who act not for glory but for the sake of doing what is right. If this story touched your heart, please engage with the video. Like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that courage can come from anyone, anywhere. And before you leave a comment telling us what you would do if you were in Thomas's shoes. In the end, it wasn't money or power that won the day. It was humanity. It was the janitor who refused to walk away. It was the man who saw a person in need and whispered with unwavering conviction, "I will defend her." That single act of bravery didn't just save a billionaire. It reminded the world that courage is not defined by titles or wealth, but by the willingness to act when no one else will, and that sometimes heroes are the ones who sweep the floors while quietly shaping destiny.